in Makhanda. Margie Maestri mentioned in one of her writings last year the triple challenges of inequality, poverty and unemployment, and the pandemic of corruption, which we also heard about today quite a bit, on the rise. Somebody at Rhodes was saying, when I studied, when I was going to go to study, I couldn't go to Rhodes. It was alien to me. This was some long time ago. It was an alien place. It was too elitist. I didn't feel at home. One of the respondents was telling me that. And we also learned that in 2012, only 11 students from township schools came to Rhodes University. One of the respondents also was talking to Dai and was saying that the relationship between Rhodes and Makhanda is like an orange. You squeeze it and you take the juice and you leave us with the peel and the rind, but you take the juice away, which is very nicely put, I thought. And then also there has been some complaint which came out yesterday in one of the presentations as well about the fact that people thought, academics thought that the community has been over-researched, which says quite a lot about community engagement in all of those places, that there used to be very little of that, perhaps, from what we've learned. These challenges are complex. So Barnett talked about complex and super-complex challenges. So the complex challenges are the ones that you see in Makhanda and all over the place. There's a systems and a structures overload. There are too few resources. We're getting poorer by the moment. And stress emanates from that, and the only way you can really do anything about it is to get more resources. And that is very often where we get our community engagement projects from, is looking at the challenges in the community. But there's also, Barnett said, super complex challenges. I've deliberately put that X on the second line in case you thought that was a typo, because those super complex challenges come when we have complex challenges. So when we're in stress, we get the super complex challenges. And Barnett said, we dispute the ways we make meaning of the world. We all have different ways of looking at this, and as a result, our sense of self becomes disordered, he said. We lose a clear sense of our own identity, he said, and we lose a sense of our responsibilities towards ourselves, but also towards our communities or institutions and that. Somebody from Rhodes also said, we need to double check ourselves. We need to go back and look at who we are. To see what we can do about this issue of being overwhelmed by problems, as we call them. So Barnett again, he was talking about being and becoming, like very many academics and researchers. He proposed that we need a therapeutic pedagogy, offering recovery of the self, of me, myself, but also the recovery of the community in which we're working. He called it a renewal of the human spirit. That's a sense of being and becoming. So that is what this is about, this presentation is about, really. There was a very lovely quote from an early childhood practitioner who said, I'm not going to wait for anyone, the outsider, to come inside, because I'm just doing it because it's all about the passion. And that really was a very nice thing, I thought, that statement, because she knows who she is, and she knows where she's going with that. That's what we're looking for, really, I think. Our sense of self, identity and belonging, who am I, and so on, my being and becoming, also goes with the word belonging. Where do I belong? This is very important as well. If we're not going to feel alienated from our own community or from the university or whatever, wherever we live. The way that we look at it in the early childhood field is with 4 questions with little children, and they're such lovely questions. Where do I come from? And that's all about my ancestors, my family, my community, my history, the history of my family and neighborhood. Where do I come from? Who am I? It's a question we don't ask ourselves enough about. Who am I? And where do I belong? What is my sense of belonging? To think about that question. And then after that, where am I going? Once I know who I am, where I come from, and I've acknowledged and named those parts of myself, this is linked to the big question of where do we come from? Who are we? What is our sense of belonging and solidarity? And where are we going together? And the big thing about this is that unless you do who am I, it's difficult to know who are we. And unless you do who are we, it's difficult to know who am I. So the two things work very closely together. And that, for me, in all the work that I do, which is practitioning work as opposed to academic work, really, all of that work, all of these questions to me is the nub of the issue. And the difficulty is that it takes time. So when you're doing community engagement work, you've got to spend quite a bit of time debating, who am I? And who are we? What do we want? Where do we come from? And so on and so forth. And that's how one gets a feeling of community engagement, I think. Here's another quote that I came across in a video that I think journalism people made a couple of years ago of a man who's a firefighter in Makhanda. And he said, the legacy that I one day would like to leave behind is to know that all that I have done, what I could, knowing that I could make a difference in my community. But if you have a goal or a project, you always work towards achieving that. And that's how I would like to leave this place, knowing that I, in my time, I've made a difference. And I think that, for me, again, the whole philosophy of community engagement is knowing who I am and who we are and making a difference. So I think as human beings, we all want to think like that. What's the meaning of my life, in fact? And again, I want to say that I think in all the courses we run and in all the projects we run, this is a big question, and we hardly give time to it, really. Even to ourselves, we don't necessarily. That I'm talking about with this, with community engagement. So spirit, growing out through the cracks or the potholes of Makhanda. If you look at the Oxford Dictionary and wherever else, APA and whatever, what it is the strength, our courage, our energy, and our determination. I want to make a difference. It's about, in the top on there, it's about animating in a vital force. It's a life force that you feel you've got that force of being alive. I think that's very important. It's about your mind, heart, soul, body. It's the whole of us, including our hands. What do we do? It's about our moral and our ethical sense. How are we going to first do know? People at Rhodes said the spirit enables us to collaborate with people we wouldn't normally think about for deep discussions about something, which takes me on to the next slide, which is what drives us. So Rhodes, for example, and just about all community engagement is driven by this idea, the philosophy of Ubuntu, that we've heard a lot about the last 2 days. Also an ecological view of life and the purpose of academic life. So how I put it here are the 5 pillars of Ubuntu: solidarity, or working together. Paolo, I know Tandi's doing something with water purity, for example. So that's her challenge, but she's working with all the participants who connected to this challenge. which is school children and whoever else in the community is doing that. But she also has to make relationships, the mesosystem, and connections with everybody in order to build up this communication community. And then that includes the macro system, which is all the cultural laws and the local and global ideas and people's different versions of what is right and how to do things. And then that happens, and I say even with government, because in the work that I do, I find very often people want to discard government as being not useful to the project. And I keep wanting to say we can't do that. We've got to engage, even with government, as it were. We're so wanting to do things ourselves and so bad-mouthing other organizations that we forget this business of communication and communality, if you like. The third thing is the academic side, and I found some very interesting reading about critical thinking. So at the top there is what we all do, and academics do, and we do in the NGO world, and little children aged 5 do. They just don't call it this, critical thinking, where we investigate and we find out and we question and we do research and we reason and we think about things. That is curious. Then there's also the deep thinking. We listen, especially listen for life and a living. And this is such a fabulous thing because the education for life is about the spirit, I think, about who am I, how do I fit in, who are we, who are you, how do we make a community, how are we communal within the same walls, if you like. So that is wonderful, that's education for life and a living. Some of the people who I was talking to and listening to mainly said, it's about the ethics we have. It's the Ubuntu. Somebody else said, building relationships is key. We have to discuss how we're going to do this at the beginning. Right at the beginning, we can't leave it to when there is a problem. We need to build that, and that was in the previous speaker here. That discussion was also about how do you remain transparent and open in your work. We have to discuss what we'll do at the beginning. What do we mean when we say we are doing this together? What does that mean? Because it's Bell Hooks, whom I didn't interview, but I read about. She said, it's about being a wholeness, a union of mind and body and spirit. And I really like that, her idea of humanizing pedagogy. It's wonderful. Rhodes University, this is very interesting as well, listening to, was it Margie Maestri yesterday was giving us a history of this Makhanda thing. And how it started, I was reading up about it as well, how it seemed to have started was that GADRA was started in about 1957. It was a community service organization. And then it brought in other people, the churches, community-minded people, and Rhodes people, and their main issue was malnourishment amongst young children. What are we going to do about it? So it was a service, not an engagement in those days, or a community development thing. But out of that, sort of came up, I think, the Center for Social Development, 1981, with Thelma Henderson, who developed that, also a service organization as opposed to a real community engagement thing. I used to work with them very closely and did very many fabulous things, and then more or less developed over the years to be much more community engaged in the way that we understand it. And then out of that, through the processes of the national systems and so on. The Senate committee here in 2008 set up community engagement, I think, and Rhodes was established in 2009, and Rhodes now is going on doing what it does, starts with the short courses. The point I want to make here is that it seems to me, from the reading I've done about it, that the process Rhodes and Rhodes has taken is a community-engaged process, that it developed in the same way as I think it was Makhanda was talking about earlier, about the learning trust here, and that the whole thing has developed and become a community-engaged sort of university, if you like, through this whole process. So the experience of Rhodes and Rhodes seems to me to be the very same experience that we all go through when we do community engagement. So what is the spirit, and how do we nurture the spirit in community engagement? And really it's about a community of practice. Oh, we've got 5 seconds left. Community of practice. And how do you do this? You make sure that, quick, humanizing pedagogy, Paulo Freire, Hope and Timmel, Sally Hope and Timmel, and you look at education for life. It's not going to happen today. It's going to take until you die to get it right. You know, that's how we are as human beings. And we need to shine a light, that is, reflect on what we're doing all the time in a very transparent way. So we've got to say, oh, I made a mistake there. What was the effect? What harm did I do? And what did I do? And what am I going to do next? Community of practice. Then the way forward really is for the way that we run courses, workshops, whatever we call them, is not banking, which is Paulo Freire's great horror. And there's a lovely picture of banking there, of somebody pouring petrol into somebody else's head. This is Chris Hodzi, who was working in Zimbabwe in the 1985 time. And what we do instead is we identify the problem together, we interrogate the power and the social injustice, we do dialogue and critical thinking, we consciousness raising all the time, we enabling praxis, which is doing and reflecting and doing and reflecting, and then we hope to get some sort of transformation of ourselves as well as the community. The thing that I like best, and I'm nearly finished, is because I'm an early childhood person, I like play-based learning. Ludic pedagogy is called in real posh English. Ludo just means play, but play-based learning. And in the Eastern Cape, we've taken all the talk about play-based learning and we called it ijamsi. So whatever we do should be ijamsi. Must be inclusive, joyful, active, meaningful, social, and iterative. That means that you make mistakes and you try again. So that is the process, I think, that I found with community-engaged projects, is that you've got to do that as much as you can. Do the ijamsi method. It works very well. People like it. And when it's joyful, it doesn't mean to say you get instant joy. You know what it is if you're doing your master's or your PhD, it's not joyful necessarily until you graduate, and then you feel the joy at the end of that. So joy happens either during, in little bits, or when you've achieved. And then finally, the desired impact. I came across this man who I think is just fantastic. His name is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And he said, you've got to have flow. And what this means is he talked about it being in the zone. You've got to be so focused on the joy and the passion of what you're doing in community engagement that you have a sense of ecstasy at the bottom there. You're completely involved and concentrated. You have great inner clarity about what it is you're doing and why. you have a sense of serenity, joy, you have intrinsic motivation, you really want to get this right, you're not doing it for somebody else, and you know that the activity is doable, you're not flying in the sky, as it were, and you have a sense of timelessness. That is, you don't think, oh, gosh, I've got to get my thing done by Monday, and I'm going to just shortcut it. No, you do that, but you carry on after that. And then my final slide. And I'm feeling quite proud, even though I passed the red face picture. In 2023, 170 students from Makhanda Township schools registered at Rhodes University, compared to the 11 of 20 whenever it was. And in 2023, the first journal was put out, and in 2025, the new postgrad diploma in higher education is going to come out. And that, I think, says a lot about community engagement. It sort of works, don't you think? Thank you.